some of you who may not know who I am, I'm Heshi Ginsburg. And this is my mother, Alice Ginsburg. How does one introduce one's mother on a talk like this? It's difficult. I'll just say very briefly, she was born in town Munkach. Family was oscillating back and forth over the years, both before and after she was born, on the Munkach-Satmar axis, if you will. Yes, my grandfather was a Satmar Chassid, although he never had a beard and so on. It's a whole other story. I used to say of me that I'm a good boy even though I was a Tzioni. And my mother raised me to be a Tzioni. That was important to her. With all the difficulties she went through early in her life, the one thing she used to point to was my grandfather's optimism. He also survived the war, survived Auschwitz, lived to the age of 96, died 2 days after we came on Aliyah. And my mother would always say, you can't forget the pain, you can't ignore the pain, but you just have to look forward and build forward on it. And her building was her family, her kids, her grandkids, and especially her great-grandkids.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about my experience as a 13-year-old going through the Holocaust. As Heshi was saying, I was born in Munkach, Czechoslovakia at the time. And in 1939, we were, the Hungarians took over. They invaded Hungary. They invaded Czechoslovakia. And actually, this is the area called the Carpathian part of Ukraine. It's not like Budapest, Hungary. This was occupied by Czechoslovakia, then Hungary. It was in 1939, but so times started to get bad, and it was hard to make a living. So my father had to resort to blackmail, which not blackmail.
Black market.
Black market.
Black market.
Yeah. So what he did was he purchased raw hides from animal hide, and he worked with it he had an attic in his house, and he would spread it out, stretch it out, and dry it, paint it, and that was my job to deliver it. Black market. I was between 12 and 13 years old, tall and skinny. So he wrapped it around my body, and I put a big coat on, and it was my job to deliver it. And I still remember the fear in me about, what if they find me? What if they find out what I'm doing? But I delivered it, and I guess it was okay. And so things started to happen like that. I was about to enter high school, and my uniform was all ready. I was very proud of it. Jews could no longer go to school, of course. And what the Hungarians did, they mobilized the men, all the men, to hard labor for the war effort. This was before the Nazis came in. The Hungarians already started that. A lot of them didn't make it back. My father, thank God, made it back. But they died from hard labor. And my father, the big optimist, kept writing postcards home saying that hope keeps us going. And he made it back, and by that time the Nazis came in. Of course, we probably know about it. We all had to wear a Jewish star, and soon after they mobilized us to get a ghetto. Mumkaj had a population of 30,000 people. 15,000 of those were Jews. It was a very flourishing Jewish community. So, and there was a Jewish section, and this is where the ghetto was formed. At times there were as many as 25,000 in the ghetto, not just from Mumkaj, but also from neighboring areas. And we had to double up with families, crowded condition, and some men had to work in construction for the Nazis. The brief period of time that we were in the ghetto. And then came the transport. They were ready to transport us. They prepared 45 transport boxcars, and each boxcar contained between 85 and 90 people, like sardines. And of course, we didn't know where we're going and how long the trip is going to take. So we took the minimum amount of things, mostly food. And of course, we didn't know how much food to take, how long it's going to last. So we tried not to eat much of it. And to this day, I remember.
What year was that?
At 1940, the Nazis came in 1944. Actually, it was right after, in April, right after Pesach.
Thank you.
Right. And, I remember my mother's delicious kokosh, if you know what kokosh is. I was dying to have it. I said, no, I'm going to put it off. We don't know how long it's going to take. Sure enough, after about a week, when we arrived in Auschwitz, I didn't know it was Auschwitz, but that's where it was. I was hungry, and we had to get off the trains. The food remained there, and I continued to be hungry the rest of the year, of course. Not hunger, but starvation. Anyhow, so we arrived at night. Everybody got off. My poor 80-year-old grandmother put her in a wheelchair, and we had to form a column. And we saw smoke and fire all around us. And my father knew that he suspected what would happen. And he told us to say Shema Yisrael. And we do, because it's the end. So we did that, and then they separated men from women. My father went with my brother, and he told us later on that he told my brother to say that he's older than he was. He was 15. And my father told him, I'm 42, and I'm strong, and I can work. He was smart. And I went with my mother, holding on tight to her, and my 9-year-old sister on the other side. Sorry. And my grandmothers, my aunt with her 8 children, including a set of twins, we were walking, and the selection began. It was a Polish Jew who was already there for several years. I mean, it was 1944 for me, but for them it was 1942 probably. And he was doing the selection with Mengele in the background supervising. I didn't know it was Mengele. I saw an officer. I found out later on. So as he does the selection, he pulls me away from my mother and sends me to the other side, which, the ones that will survive. And I ran back to my mother. And he came to me again and pulled me away. I looked older than 13. Children under 14 were set aside for elimination. And I was only 13, but I was tall. And this time I ran to the officer, Mangala, and telling him, I'm only 13, please let me go with my mother. Bashir. And he was like, like harassed, that kind of, how they spoke. He told the Polish guy to deal with me. And as I went back to my mother, she said, go. And we hugged and we kissed. That was so hurting. Anyhow, we got to the other side and they stripped us, took our clothes off and put on the striped uniform. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And I have it here. Thank you. They shaved our hair off. My cousin had a cousin that I didn't even recognize her. She was all bald and striped uniform and all that. And they put us into a barrack with double-decker beds, but they were wide, just a board, no mattress. Eight inmates on each end. And gave us our rations, one piece of bread for the day, which we held on to dearly because they stole from each other. In fact, at night I put it under my head. That was my pillow, and safeguarding the bread. And they gave us this very green liquid soup, which nobody could eat. They threw up from it, they had diarrhea, but I ate it. And that's how I was able to survive. While in Auschwitz, they had these selections 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, regardless of the weather. And this was already going into fall. And strip you naked, completely naked, dehumanizing you. The aim of the Nazis was to put you down lower than animals, primitive, that's why they were able to do what they did to you, because they didn't consider you human. So we stood naked, and they're constantly counting you and selection. And I was in the first row. I was busy pinching my cheek, standing tall, straight, so I should appear older than I was. But it was very humiliating. This went on for as long as I was there, several months. Every single day. And of course, when they took people out of the row, that means they eliminated them. So you didn't know from one minute to the next. It didn't work in Auschwitz. This was the existence in Auschwitz. And starvation can make you do a lot of things. At night, some other people snuck out and went to the back of the officer's kitchen and looked through the garbage cans for food. And we were surrounded by barbed wires. Anything could have happened, but starvation, it will drive you to it. And found some potato peels, and I ate that. It had vitamin C in it, dirty, but vitamin C. that's what I ate. So this is what took place at Auschwitz. And then they took us to a different camp to work. I didn't know at the time, but it was an ammunition factory. It was in Reichenbach. But we didn't stay there. We stayed in a different area, Longenbello, and we walked every day 5 miles to the factory, the ammunition factory. And most of these places were in between, at the borders between Poland and Germany, which they're disputing now about the camps. So, so the food was slightly increased, not much, but better than it was. And they put me in front of a machine. I had to do I did what they showed me. I was, they were guarding you constantly, looking to see if you're doing it well, and I didn't want to have any problems. So this went on for several months, and then the long march began, the death march. You must have heard of the death march. It was winter time, and walked for several weeks. And I tried to maintain the line, shouldn't go out of line, and walk straight. And they were dropping left and right all around me. And those women SS guards were even meaner than the men, very mean. They were just looking for an excuse to shoot you or whatever. So that was, your shoes were worn out. There were 2 sisters from my hometown, older than myself. They were walking same column, same time. And one sister said to the other, "I can't take this anymore. I want to just stay here and die, and you go ahead without me." And the other sister said, "No, if you die, I'll die. So you better get up and go." And she did, and she made it. So you needed a lot of perseverance, which thank God I had, a lot of perseverance. That's why it was called the Death March, because a lot of people dropped left and right. So we arrived at a place called Paschnitz, where we were told to dig ditches. And I said to myself, I wonder what is this for us? In the background, we were only, there were women were always separated from men, but we saw men further away doing the same thing. We didn't know why, but there may have been bunkers for the German soldiers, I don't know. So this is what we did there. And one day, it suddenly got very quiet in camp. They left us. Nobody was around. So we realized it must be close to liberation. So a wagon full of food came in, and a lot of people attacked the food too much too soon and died from it. But these 2 friends from my hometown decided not to wait till we were all alone. The Liberation Army didn't, so we left before the Russians came in. I just followed these 2 girls. And we left the camp, and we took some food with us from the wagon. And we just went walking. And as we walk, we see this massive amount of people from all the camps walking. Massive amount. And all we did was ask everybody, did you see my mother? Did you see my father? Did you see my... everybody just wanted to know who survived. And I happened to meet people that knew my father, and they said that your father and brother are fine. And they survived because my uncles worked in the kitchen, and they snuck out food to them. And my brother, one of the officers took a liking to my brother. He was 15 years old. He was busy shining their boots. And so, because of that, they favored him. So they didn't, so he had an easier time. So, where do we go? Just kept walking. We got on trains, buses, walking. A lot of it I don't remember. Maybe it's a blessing or in disguise. But all I know is I wanted to go home to find my family. And I get home, I go straight to my house. And of course, somebody's living there. And they just stood there and looked. What do you think you're here for? That kind of thing. And I said, all I want to know, would they know where my uncles are? And they told me where they are. And I thought maybe my father would be there too. So when I went to the house, they told me he's not there, but he's in Budapest in a hospital. No, just that he's in Budapest. They didn't know about the hospital part. But my uncle, one of the uncles, had that wife and the 8 children that I walked with. The oldest was 12 years old. And when he heard that I survived, he was hoping that she would too. So it was very difficult for me. And he asked me. All I did was do this. That man was devastated. He was devastated, 8 children. The oldest one was 12. She probably carried one of the kids. Maybe I don't know. Who is to know? So that was a difficult moment. Then I went back to Budapest. I don't know how I got back, by the way. Don't remember. And they had agencies there to help you out, like hires and joint distribution. So I went there to register, and I asked them if they know where my father is. And they told me that he's in hospital with my brother, recuperating from typhus, and I shouldn't go. And sure enough, I saw them afterwards, and they were fine. So that's how I met them. I also had 2 sisters that lived in Budapest. They had left Munkacs to go to Budapest to earn some money to send back home. One was 19, the other one was 20 years old. And my one sister looked very Jewish, so she was always afraid when she walked on the street. She kept saying, "Oh, they're looking at me, they're looking at me." Then the Nazis came into Budapest after Munkacs, already late into 1944. That's when they tried to deal with Adolf, about deals. So she ran from one house to another. She ended up in a safe house. Roll Wallenberg ran a safe house. That was one sister. The other sister wanted to go home. She didn't know what was really going on. So she acquired false papers. She went to the station, and the police looked at the papers and looked and looked. And then he put it in his belt, while two other passengers he was distracted by two other passengers. When my sister saw that moment of opportunity, she ran away. And he was shooting after her. And she told me later on, she didn't care if they killed her, but she didn't want to be captured. And she kept on running, and he kept on shooting and didn't hit her. And she went into a convent, Catholic convent. She changed her name to not non-Jewish sounding name, Christian name. And she went into the convent. And she told them she's running away from the communists. And behind her back, she heard how much anti-Semitic remarks they not about her, in general. And so after a while, she left them away. All right, so we were reunited. Of course, I never saw my mother and sister again, my beautiful 9-year-old sister. And for a whole year, I just cherished that hug and a kiss, and we parted. And I never gave up hope. And I kept on keeping that alive. So, like my father, the big optimist and positive man, I acquired that. I never gave up hope, and I maintained my perseverance. But, or maybe I was very naive, I was very young. The combination. So after the war, we had no place to go, so they had these displaced person camps. So we went to one in Leipheim, Bavaria, Germany. And that was wonderful. It was wonderful. I was free. I had at least part of my family. I had what to eat. It was one of the wonderful things that I experienced. It was just a displaced person camp, but it was so good. There were Zionists, people from Zionist organization trying to teach us about Zionism, about Palestine. We had lectures, we had music, we were dancing. It was there for 2 years. And we thought we would go to Palestine. My other sister went on illegal aliyah with her husband. She met somebody and got married and went. So, in the meantime, when my father went to register in one of the organizations, the agencies, they asked him if he has any relatives in America. And we did. He had a lot of uncles here. Not here, in America.
There.
There. And the agency contacted his uncles, and they sent us papers. And so we decided to go to America. So my father got hold of an English-Hungarian dictionary. He taught himself English already. And after 2 years, we ended up in America. And that was another adjustment to go through. But
Where in America?
pardon me?
Where in America?
New York.
Lower East Side?
Pardon me?
The Lower East Side?
No, Lower East Side was when people escaped from the pogroms in the 1900s, the Russians. We went to stayed to Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. I had relatives there. So that was another adjustment. And anyhow, I was grateful to Hashem that I survived. And I had a beautiful family. I have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, so I got even with Hitler. Yeah. So another postscript I'd like to add is when Avi was in high school, he went to Poland, one of those trips that they ran. And Heshi and Sue gave him a letter to open when he gets to Auschwitz. You remember that, Avi? Saying that your great-grandfather that you were blessed enough to know was there, and somebody snuck in a pair of film. I don't know how they did it, but they did. And he used to get up early in the morning and put on film, either the Rosh or the Yad. There wasn't enough to go around. They did it secretly at great risk. And also, my mother, your great-grandmother, was killed there with other family members. So when Avi passed a pile of shoes, he jumped in, he put on his tefillin and said, Kaddish for my mother. And I'll never forget that. So life goes on. Life goes on. When I came to America, I said to myself, I'm not going to look back, I'm going to look forward. And that's what I did. I looked forward. And never talked about my experiences, and I don't think anybody was interested in hearing it in those days. And I started talking about it recently. I was very difficult to get started, but I felt the obligation. I'm my grandchildren's school, and I felt I have to do it. And life goes on. And thank God, I have a lot to be grateful for, in spite of everything. I'll be happy to answer any questions you'd like to ask.
Excuse me. Hi. After the fall of communism, was your family able to apply for reparations from the Czech government for the property that you had, the property that was stolen by the Nazis?
I didn't have any property. Didn't have any property.
Even your parents' house, there was no way to claim it.
Oh, we didn't even bother. No, we did have a house there, but no.
How did you know not to eat the food?
What?
How did you know not to eat too much food?
Oh,
Do you remember?
well, we just decided to leave before the Russians came in. Because, I don't know, these girls must have known they have a bad reputation. So we just took some off the wagon, and yes, it's too bad that after so much suffering they survive and then they die from overeating. That was not unusual. No, it just happened. Yes.
I just want to add to the story of my grandfather putting on tefillin, because he used to tell it to me a lot. And that, like my mother said, I mean, there was a line of people, and you either got to put on the Shel Rosh or the Shel Yad. But there were those who wanted to put on both. And they would get up even earlier just so they could put on the Shel Rosh and the Shel Yad. And my grandfather would say that those were the real tzaddikim. As opposed to him, it was just a plain old guy who would, suffice with the Shel Rosh and the Shel Yad.
I don't know how they snuck it in. No, because they stripped you naked. You had nothing on you. I'd have no pictures, absolutely nothing. I don't know how they did it, and took such a tremendous chance. They were looking for any excuse to shoot you, and they did it. That's strong faith that they had. So, sure.
Oh,
I'm surprised that the girls that were twins were not kept alive to be.
The girls were not twins; they were sisters. The girls that.
Your cousins, you said.
But I don't know what happened to them.
Because I would have imagined that Mengele would have wanted to.
Well,
keep them
maybe
alive.
the Polish guy didn't realize that they're twins.
Uh-huh.
It's
You
possible.
don't think that they were kept alive at all for any experiments? We think that they were.
Well, you know, I was torn away from there. I don't know what happened afterwards.
Assuming this is not recorded by the Polish government, did you see any cooperation of Polish people? Did you see complicity by the Poles while you were at Auschwitz?
Oh, I can tell you about, I missed telling you, one of the Polish, the capos, have you heard of the capos? Well, the supervisor of my barrack, the capo, she was powerful, she looked powerful and mean as can be. You're never going to see your family again. See the fire, see the smoke, you're never going to see the family again. Did you have to be that mean? It wasn't an easy job when the Nazis assigned Jews to supervise other Jews. It's a difficult job, right? But you don't have to go out of your way to say those things. But she couldn't take my hope away from me, no matter what she said. There was a pregnant woman in the bunk, about to give birth. We tried very hard to hide her. And she found out about it, and that was the end of it. I mean, she may have been bitter. I mean, this was 1944. She may have been there since 1942. She was very mean, yeah. But and like the Polish guy who did the selection, I mean, he did me a favor. He insisted on me going to the other side. If that's not Bashir, I don't know. I ran, but
the Polish non-Jews, did the Goyim, the Polish?
I
Goyim?
didn't see them. I
The
wouldn't know.
Germans did not, to the best of my knowledge, the Germans would not trust Poles to be guards or functionaries in the camps. For the most part, if at all, they did not view them very highly, as opposed to Lithuanians, etc.
I wouldn't know if he was a Polish Jew or a Polish non-Jew.
Can we ask a question?
Sure.
Did you guys do anything special during the march?
What was the march like? You want some of the marching, the death march.
Special?
Or something like
So this was a death march, a forced death march. We walked and we walked. At night, we slept in on haystacks in a barn and continued to walk. I mean, people were dropping left and right. It was, it's a form of elimination as well. We walked 100 miles. 100 miles we walked. You really needed perseverance to survive.
What did they tell you? Did they tell you why you were doing this? Was there any
Did
explanation?
I care? They're going to inform us anything? They did, but it occurred to me later on that these officers that were so mean to us and treated you worse than animals, they went home at night to a loving family with affection. And then the next day you go and do this to human beings. They did not consider us human. They couldn't. How could you switch over from a loving family and know what it's like and then treat you like that? It's a mindset. They were indoctrinated. That's it.
Was there any attempt by the local population to help you in March?
No, I didn't have that experience. No, that happened mostly in Poland, where some Poles did hide Jews. No, I didn't have it.
Were you given any food on the march, or did you just scoop up snow along the way?
You know what? I don't remember. I really don't remember. There's a lot I don't remember. Maybe it's a blessing, I don't know. I was very young. But these sisters remembered. I have a cousin who's 2 years older than me. She remembers everything. She remembers we were together, then we were separated.
David? David?
Do you know what's left in Munkach? And would you, in terms of, did any Jews go back?
Yes.
And if you could, would you want to go back?
No. I had, yes, those uncles that I told you about, they stayed, cousins. Later on, they came to the United States. Why go back? But it was, occupied by Russians there. They didn't have it so good. No desire to go there.
Sit down.
I had a good friend, very good friend, who came from Munkach, and he went back, he passed away a few years ago. Maybe it was 10 years ago, he went and he took a trip back to Munkach. It was like the land that he came from didn't even exist. It was like a totally different.
When was that?
Had to be about maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that.
Oh, well, it's a long time.
And
This was 70 years ago.
I know, but he went back. He was,
Can't believe it was so many years ago, and I
he
should
grew
remember
up-
things.
He was in Auschwitz, and I remember him describing the walk just like you described, and how his brother died right in front of him, and was murdered by the Nazis. And he wanted to go back to Munkach, and he was really, I guess he must have been very disappointed to find that it was just not the same place.
What did he need Munkach for?
He just felt like going back to see what it was like.
I don't miss it at all.
I had another question, is that at the worst times in which you were in Auschwitz, is there anything that you can remember about what gave you the hope to continue?
I'm just naturally a hopeful person.
Okay, you just answered the question.
I just had that sense. Thank God, I must have inherited it from my father, because he was very positive and hopeful man. He wrote those postcards, he says, hope keeps us going. That was when the Hungarians sent him to hard labor before the Nazis came in. So a lot of them, I lost a lot of cousins there and uncles from Overberg.
Yeah.
When you got to America and you basically started a new life, and you
Right.
said always forward, not looking back.
Right.
Did your children know of your history growing up?
You can ask him. I would only answer questions. If they asked me, I told them. I would never bring it up. I never wanted to make them feel guilty that they, a lot of parents did that, made their kids feel guilty. I didn't want to do that. If they asked me, I answered. They didn't ask me, but I learned a lot in school. They went to a day school, Shiva Flatbush, if you heard about it. And, they taught him every year during Yom HaShoah. He saw Holberg's. He didn't ask me any questions, but he found out anyway.
The grandchildren were the ones who really started asking. Well, Judith, actually. Was it Judith?
Yeah, Aviva and you didn't ask. My older daughter wouldn't ask. She was afraid that I'm gonna have nightmares if she makes me talk about it.
We were afraid it would upset you.
Yeah, right. And you the same way. But my youngest one, she always asked questions. I would only answer the question. I would not. My brother, on the other hand, would talk about it every Friday night. tell his children all about it. They didn't mind. I wouldn't do that.
It's probably just as, I mean, ask my kids what it's like when I start asking questions. And it's just as well that I didn't ask.
No, it's
Right, Avi?
in those days. Now people are. It's coming to light. And people want to talk about it because it's important. You know, there are not too many of us left, and it's important to continue the conversation because we don't want it to happen again, and they should know about it. But in those days, nobody wanted to hear, and I wasn't anxious to talk about it. I wanted to, like I said, look forward, make a life for myself, and thank God, I have a lot to be grateful for. A beautiful family. Thank you.
You did come to America with some family. You had
I-
family with you.
I came with my father, brother, and one sister, and the other sister came here to Israel.
Did you talk about it among yourselves, about your experiences, what everybody had experienced?
Well, my sister told me later on, not right away. Maybe it was too painful. We didn't talk about it right away. Just we were so busy concentrating on making a new life. But later on, they told me about their experiences. That wasn't easy either. I don't know which is worse. Having to be in hiding, in constant fear, and running from one place to another. I had no choice. I just did what I had to do to survive, but I didn't have much of a choice.
You may not have to answer this, you may not want to answer this, but did you have a crisis of faith at any point?
I didn't think about it then. The answer is no. No. I guess my father instilled that he had such faith. It's unbelievable. I have that from him.
Have you documented your story in some way?
Yes. Spielberg sent the crew out to my house and interviewed me and filmed, documented it, and they followed up with a very nice letter because it wasn't an easy thing to do. Yes, documented by Spielberg and Yad Vashem. Has to be done.
You know, my father was an American soldier. He fought in France and Germany against the Nazis for 2.5 years. But he would never talk about his experiences in Germany or France. Never talked about it, either to his children or to his wife.
What did they ask him?
Yeah, but he never.
Well, if I was asked, I answered, but I wouldn't.
I don't remember.
No, if I was asked, I would answer, but I wouldn't offer to talk about it because I didn't want to make them feel bad. Actually, I was as I was raising my children, I couldn't imagine how my 13-year-old could possibly survive what I went through. I didn't tell him that, but I was thinking about it. Or today's children. Maybe it started off with, I didn't have an easy time growing up either because times were bad. I was very young. So,
I want to point out one little tidbit in terms of overcoming adversity. My mother mentioned that she started learning English from a English-Hungarian dictionary in the DP camps and came and so.
Zadie did.
You did too?
Yeah, well, we did it together.
Okay, well, Zadie's idea, fine. I grew up with English as my only language. My mother didn't speak to me in Yiddish. She didn't speak to me in Hungarian. And my grandfather actually never forgave her for not teaching me Yiddish.
My father said, "Why don't you speak Yiddish to them so they can learn?" So I said, "Why don't you?" he spoke English to them.
Well, a little bit of Yiddish too, Hungarian and so on. But
I used to love to talk Yiddish to my father. No, he spoke English too, but I loved Yiddish.
one of my brothers-in-law is fluent in Yiddish. And he used to speak to my grandfather used to love to speak to him because he could speak to him the Mama Lashon.
He spoke a Gesinte Yiddish. He speaks a Gesinte Yiddish.
He speaks a
And he learned it from his grandmother, who lived in he lived in Brooklyn, and his grandmother lived in Canada, and he would visit his grandmother every summer, and that's how he learned Yiddish.
Alice, was it a culture shock when you came to America? I can just imagine you walking through Manhattan, just the buildings, the everything.
I was in Brighton Beach. I don't know when I got to go to Manhattan. I had family in Brighton, and that's from my mother's side. From my father's side, they lived in Bridgeport and Manhattan and all over. They were all they were here a long time already. They were all doctors and lawyers and
They assimilated.
Assimilated, yeah. That was the culture shock for my father. Assimilated. And so it goes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.